When we bought that old house, I thought it would finally feel like home. But the first night, I heard footsteps above the ceiling, slow, heavy, as if someone was walking right over me. Each night, they came back, closer than before. Now I know, something up there never left. Greetings, every shadow hides a story. Welcome. Under the bed. It happened last autumn, on the northern edge of a small town in western Ukraine, 2 kilometers from the highway and 1 field away from the river. The date was October 21st. We signed the papers in the morning, carried boxes all afternoon, and by evening my wife and I stood in the doorway of our first real home. I'm Ruz, 25. The house was old but sturdy, 2 floors, a narrow staircase, and an attic reachable by a folding ladder in the hall. When I pulled the ladder down, cold air slid over my face like water from a well. The wood smelled of dust and apples that had never finished drying. By the time we ate our first quick dinner at the kitchen counter, rain had started. The windows rattled with each gust. We were too tired to talk. The power flickered twice and then steadied. Somewhere in the wall a pipe clicked, then settled. We told each other it was normal in older houses. We kept saying that word, normal. We slept in the only room we'd managed to set up, a small bedroom beneath the attic hatch. We left most boxes in the hall. The rain thickened until it became a single sound. I drifted for a while, then woke because the house fell silent in a way that made me sit up. No wind. No cars. Only the kind of quiet that makes your breathing feel too loud. Then I heard it, a slow step above the ceiling. One board, then another. A measured weight. Not a rustle. Not a scrabble. A step. I held my breath to hear it better and the air turned heavy, like the room was taking a breath with me. Another step crossed the space over the hallway. A third stepped into the center, right above the ceiling lamp. Our lamp ticked in response, metal cooling or heating, I couldn't tell. I touched my wife's shoulder. She stirred but didn't wake. I whispered that it was just the wood settling after a day of rain. I said it quietly, to convince the room more than her. The next step came directly over the bedroom doorway, then paused. The pause was worse than the movement. In that stillness the house felt crowded, as if it was listening to me listen to it. I eased out of bed, my feet finding the cold boards. The hallway was darker than the room even with the door open. I switched on my phone flashlight and pointed it up at the square of the attic hatch. The paint around the latch was scuffed in half circles, as if many hands had reached up over many years and missed by a little. Another step sounded. Not above me anymore, but moving away toward the far end where the roof dipped low. It was slow, almost careful. The roof creaked like a voice trying not to speak. I stood under the hatch and told myself it had to be an animal. A cat trapped by the previous owners. A raccoon, though we don't have raccoons here. Maybe a large bird. I tried to picture feathers, something that felt small enough that I wouldn't have to go up there at midnight to prove a point to myself. I reached for the ladder rope. It felt damp and slightly sticky, like it had been held recently. I pulled. The ladder unfolded with a cough of hinges that sounded much too loud. My wife called from the bedroom, asking what I was doing. I said I just wanted to check a loose board before it knocked all night. That lie came easily, like the house put it in my mouth. When the hatch opened, cold attic air poured down, carrying the smell of old cardboard and something faintly sweet, then sour, like fruit gone dry and then wet again. My light cut a narrow triangle into dust. The beam caught roof beams, a sagging line of insulation, and the slope of floorboards disappearing into dark. Dust swirled and drifted back toward me in flakes, as if I had shaken snow from a tree and it refused to settle in the same place twice. I climbed 3 rungs and stopped. The silence returned. It wasn't the safe kind. It felt like the quiet you get when a person holds their breath on purpose. I raised my phone higher. The dust in the beam didn't move. Then a board creaked beyond the light, and a second later the dust shivered forward, as if air had passed around something that stood very still. I listened for the tiny sounds that give animals away, the nervous scratch, the sudden scuttle. None came. Instead, there was a slow exhale from the dark, so soft it could have been my own breath rolling back at me. The light found a nail head shiny with a smear, the shape of a thumbprint set into old grime. I lowered the phone, and the beam swung over a line of marks near the hatch opening, small arcs in the dust where something had turned in the same spot, too light to be a box dragged, too neat to be accident. My wife called my name again. The sound of her voice broke whatever thread held the quiet together. A single step sounded above me, close enough that the ladder shuddered. I froze. Another step followed, slow as counting. One more. Then the weight shifted across the beams and came to a stop. Directly above our bed. I closed the hatch, the ladder folding itself with a sigh. I told my wife there was nothing, just the house settling. We lay in the dark listening to the rain begin again in thin, separate drops. For a full minute nothing else moved. Then, with the same patient rhythm as before, the steps started once more, and I realized they were not crossing the attic anymore. They were pacing in a circle, and each time the circle closed, the last board that creaked was the one over our pillows. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky still hung low and gray. I woke up feeling as if I hadn't slept at all. My wife said I'd been turning all night, mumbling something about footsteps. She didn't hear them herself. Maybe I hadn't either. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that hatch above our bed. After breakfast, I pulled the ladder down again. Cold air poured over me, and the smell from last night returned, old dust and something faintly sweet, like rotten fruit. Sunlight came through a small round window at the far end of the attic, slicing across the floorboards. I climbed up slowly, telling myself it was just to prove there was nothing there. The attic looked empty at first. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling like bones. The floor was layered in dust thick enough to keep footprints. I scanned the boards with my flashlight. Near the middle, I saw faint marks, small arcs where something had been dragged, maybe boxes. In the far corner, behind an old trunk, something white caught my eye. I reached for it and pulled out a tiny shoe. A child's shoe. Covered in dust, the leather stiff and cracked, one lace missing. I stared at it longer than I should have. My first thought was that the previous owners must have had kids. But the house was sold as vacant for years. I put the shoe back where I found it. As I turned to leave, I noticed a patch of dust that looked recently disturbed, small, uneven shapes, too small for my own shoes. That night, the sounds came again. At first, soft creaks, like wood settling. Then, distinct steps, slow, deliberate. I lay still, watching the ceiling. The steps stopped right above me, the same spot as before. My wife whispered, "Do you hear that?" Finally, she heard it too. We both froze. The steps resumed, crossing the attic, then stopping again. The air in the room felt heavy, as if something was pressing down from above. I took my phone, opened the recorder, and set it on the nightstand. I whispered that it was probably animals. My voice trembled enough to make the lie sound weak. The steps stopped completely around 3 in the morning. I waited another half hour before I turned off the recorder. We didn't speak again that night. In the morning, the house seemed normal. Light through the windows, birds outside. Almost peaceful. I played back the recording over coffee. At first, only static and the hum of the fridge. Then, the sound of footsteps, clearer than I remembered. Slow. Right above us. But what froze me wasn't the steps. It was what came after. A faint, whispering breath. My name. Ruz. It was soft, almost questioning. Then another breath, closer to the microphone, as if leaning in. My wife looked at me, pale. "That's not your voice," she said. I played it again. The same whisper, the same single word. My name, drawn out through static. The sound of breathing filled the last few seconds before the recording cut off with a sharp click. That evening, I went up again with a flashlight and a broom handle for courage. The air felt colder than before. I moved the trunk aside. The spot where the child's shoe had been was empty now. I checked every corner, nothing. The dust looked smooth again, as if brushed by a hand. When I came back down, I closed the hatch tightly and pulled the ladder away from the wall. My wife asked if I'd found anything. I said no. Later that night, while brushing my teeth, I heard the faintest creak from the ceiling above the hallway. Just one sound, then silence. We slept with the lights on. At 2:17 a.m., my phone lit up on the nightstand. The recording app had turned itself on. I hadn't touched it. The timer showed 12 seconds of new audio. I pressed play. For the first 3 seconds, there was only static. Then, breathing, deep and slow. A single knock followed, like someone rapping on wood from the inside of the ceiling. Then the whisper again, quiet but clearer this time. "Don't open the door." The day after the recording, I could barely focus on anything. Every sound in the house felt heavier, slower. The creak of a chair, the hum of the fridge, all of it seemed to come from somewhere else, somewhere just beyond the walls. My wife tried to act normal, but I caught her looking up at the ceiling too often. We avoided mentioning the attic, though both of us were thinking about it. By the third evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to check every inch of that attic in daylight, record everything, and prove that it was nothing. I waited until noon, when the light was brightest. I pulled the ladder down, switched on my phone's camera, and climbed up slowly. The air inside felt still and dry. I scanned the space from one side to the other, wooden beams, cracked insulation, a few old boxes. I tapped the floor with a stick, listening for hollow spots. When I reached the far wall, the stick hit something different, dull and solid, like a hollow cavity behind the boards. I pressed my hand against the wall. It flexed slightly. There was space behind it. I found a loose plank near the corner. With the back of a hammer, I pried it open. Dust poured out in a gray cloud, and the smell that followed was sharp, earthy, and old, like a basement that had been sealed too long. Behind the plank was a small cavity. I pushed the light inside. A narrow, hidden room stretched behind the wall, maybe 2 meters wide. Inside stood an old iron bed frame with a thin, sunken mattress. Around it lay a few scattered objects, a cracked toy horse, a tin box, a faded photograph of a family. The edges were burned, but the faces were still visible. A man, a woman, and a child, maybe 5 years old. The child was holding the same kind of shoe I had found earlier. A chill ran through me. I didn't move for a full minute. I took the photo and the box downstairs. My wife watched silently as I wiped the dust from them. Inside the tin box were folded yellowed papers, a birth certificate, a hospital card, a drawing made in blue pencil. The name was the same on both, Luca. That night, I tried searching the name with the address. There was an article from 2001, a local family had disappeared from this same house. The article said no bodies were found. It mentioned a child named Luca. The house had stood empty for years afterward. I didn't tell my wife that part. The following night, the sounds returned. Louder. Not just creaks, real footsteps, crossing from one end of the attic to the other. I could hear boards bending under weight. I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, phone in hand, recording again. My wife whispered, "Please, don't go up there." The steps stopped above the door. Then, 3 slow knocks. The same rhythm as before. I gathered my courage, took the flashlight, and opened the hatch. Cold air fell through like water spilling from a broken pipe. The light caught only dust, swirling in silence. I climbed 2 rungs, then 3. My heart was hammering so hard that the beam shook in my hand. The hidden room's wall was now wide open, the planks I had pried off earlier were on the floor. The iron bed frame stood where I left it, but the mattress was gone. In its place, a small pile of dirt. Something pale stuck out from beneath it. I froze. It looked like a corner of fabric, a child's blanket. I didn't want to touch it, but my light caught something else beside it, marks on the wooden wall, etched with something sharp. I leaned closer. They were words, uneven and shaky, but readable. I can't get out. The room tilted for a second as my body filled with cold. I backed down the ladder, my foot slipping on the last rung. I hit the floor hard, but I didn't feel it. My wife ran to me, shouting my name. I told her to leave the house. We stood outside in the yard, staring up at the dark window of the attic. Inside, something moved, a small shadow crossing the glass from one side to the other. I called the local police the next morning. The morning after the police visit, the house felt emptier than before. No voices, no warmth, no movement, only the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock and the dull hum of the refrigerator. My wife didn't call, and I didn't blame her. If I were her, I wouldn't come back either. The house was mine now, and it felt like it wanted it that way. For a few days, there were no sounds from the attic. No creaking, no whispers, nothing. I almost convinced myself that everything had been stress and exhaustion. I tried to clean up, fix small things, keep busy. But at night, the silence had a pulse. You could feel it beating under the floorboards. 3 nights later, it started again. I woke to a sound that didn't belong to the house. It wasn't footsteps this time. It was softer, like a quiet sob, muffled, coming through the wall behind my bed. I sat up, listening. The sound stopped the second I moved. I waited. Then it came again, a child's cry, faint and trembling, from inside the wall. I pressed my ear against the plaster. The sobbing was clear now, real, too real to be the house settling. My throat went dry. I whispered, "Who's there?" The crying stopped. I stayed frozen for a full minute, waiting for something, anything. Then came 3 slow knocks from inside the wall, the same rhythm I'd heard from the attic. The sound was hollow and close, like knuckles on thin wood. The next morning, I walked to the neighbor's house, an old man who'd lived on the street for decades. His name was Makar. He stood in the doorway, thin, gray, eyes like glass marbles. When I told him which house I'd bought, he didn't invite me in. That house, he said quietly, was never right. People come, stay a week or 2, then leave. Some say it's the pipes, some say it's dreams. But no one lasts. He wouldn't say more. When I asked about the missing family, his expression went blank. "Don't dig," he said, and shut the door. That night, I recorded everything again. I left the phone on the nightstand, camera facing the ceiling. At 2:46 a.m., I woke to the same sound, crying behind the wall, faint but desperate. My skin went cold. I whispered, "Luca." The crying stopped immediately. Then, from above, came a dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the attic floor. The boards groaned. I could hear slow, deliberate steps moving toward the attic hatch. I turned on the flashlight and stared at the ceiling. Dust fell from between the boards. The steps stopped directly above me. For a moment, everything went silent. Then came a soft knock, once, twice, 3 times, directly above my head. I ran to the hallway and looked up at the hatch. It was trembling slightly, as if air was pushing from underneath. I climbed halfway up the ladder and pointed the flashlight at the hatch handle. It turned, just a fraction, by itself. I stumbled down and backed away, breathing hard. The handle stopped moving. The house went still again. In the morning, I checked the recording. The video showed me asleep, turning once, then waking up. For several minutes after that, there was nothing, only the sound of my breathing. But at 2:46, the crying started. It was faint but clear. Then, through the static, came a second voice, a whisper, older, rougher. It said, "Don't call him." The rest of the recording cut out. I left the phone on the table and went outside for air. The sky was dull gray again, the same color as the day we moved in. I noticed the attic window slightly open. I hadn't opened it. That evening, I nailed the attic hatch shut. I told myself it was temporary, just until I figured out what to do. I slept in the living room with all the lights on. Around midnight, I dozed off. I woke to the sound of someone walking above me again, slow, heavy steps. I stared at the ceiling, terrified, realizing that even though I had sealed the hatch, something was still moving up there. Then the steps reached the top of the staircase and stopped. The house fell silent. I barely breathed. The silence stretched for almost a minute. Then a floorboard near the living room door creaked. Something was downstairs. I held my breath, listening. A faint dragging sound moved across the hallway, wood on wood, slow, scraping. I reached for my phone but froze when a soft, childlike whisper came from behind the wall next to me. It said my name. I turned the flashlight toward the sound. The beam shook in my hand. The whisper came again, right at my ear this time, clear as speech. "Why did you open the room?" My throat closed. I couldn't answer. A cold draft swept across the floor, carrying a smell of damp earth. Then, from upstairs, a door slammed hard enough to shake the glass in the windows. The whisper faded. The steps stopped. The house was still again. That was the night I realized something had followed me out of that hidden room. I hadn't slept in 2 nights. The house no longer felt like a house, just a shell filled with cold air and the sound of its own breathing. Every light was on, yet every corner looked dark. The attic hatch was still nailed shut, but that didn't matter anymore. Whatever was in this place didn't need doors. I told myself I would leave by morning. Pack what I could, lock the door, never look back. But before I could, I had to see it one last time. I had to know what was really up there. The thought wouldn't leave me alone. It pressed against my mind until I gave in. It was just after 5 p.m., gray light outside, the kind of sky that looks like it's made of metal. I brought a hammer, a flashlight, and my phone. The nails came out easier than I expected, as if they'd already been loosened from the other side. When I pulled the hatch open, the air that poured down was freezing. It smelled like wet soil and something old that had been sealed too long. I climbed up slowly, every step echoing through the empty house. The attic was different now. The dust was disturbed in long streaks, as if someone had been crawling across the floor. The toys, the boxes, gone. Only the bed frame remained, and beside it, the pile of dirt I'd seen before. The smell was stronger here, raw and metallic. I knelt down, shining the light over the dirt. The fabric I'd seen last time was still there, the edge of a blanket, faded blue. I brushed the dirt away with shaking hands. Beneath it lay small bones, curled together like something that had gone to sleep and never woken up. A skull, tiny, fragile, with one piece of cloth wrapped around it, a child's pajama top. I couldn't breathe. My body felt locked in place. Then, somewhere behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned the light, but the beam wavered too much to focus. I stood and backed toward the ladder, whispering, "I'm sorry." I don't even know who I was saying it to. The air shifted, not wind, but movement. The dust stirred in circles. Then a faint sound rose behind me, the slow, uneven rhythm of footsteps, small ones, like bare feet crossing cold wood. I swung the light again. Nothing. But the sound didn't stop. It circled the attic once, twice, slow and steady, then came closer. I could hear breathing now, not angry, not loud, just steady, right behind me. "Luca," I whispered. "I found you." The breathing stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, from the far corner, a voice, quiet, cracked, but unmistakably a child's, said, "Don't leave me." My hand tightened around the flashlight. "You can rest now," I said, though my voice barely made a sound. A cold pressure wrapped around my wrist. It wasn't strong, but it was enough. I dropped the light. It rolled, spilling its beam across the floor, and for half a second I saw it, a small figure crouched near the wall, pale skin, hollow eyes, watching me. I stumbled back, hit the ladder, and fell halfway down before catching myself. The attic above was silent again. I ran out of the house and didn't stop until I reached the road. The sky was fading into dusk. I called the police from my car, told them what I'd found. They came at night with flashlights and gloves, methodical and quiet. I waited outside while they searched. One of them came back, his face gray. He said they had found what appeared to be human remains, a child, buried in the attic floor. They sealed the area off, marked the walls, took photographs. It was over. The next morning, they told me what they'd discovered. The family that had lived there 20 years ago, the parents had disappeared without a trace, but the boy's body had been hidden in that attic, walled in behind boards. The case had never been solved. The new evidence would reopen it. They told me I could leave town, that I didn't have to stay for the investigation. I didn't argue. I drove away before sunrise, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was just a dark spot on the hill. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't truly left it behind. I kept hearing things at night, small sounds in the walls, soft steps that never reached the floor. I told myself it was memory, nothing more. A week later, the police called. They thanked me for reporting what I'd found. Then one of them asked if I'd been back to the house. I said no. He hesitated, then said, "That's strange. Someone's been inside. We found fresh footprints in the attic dust, small ones." I hung up without answering. That night, as I lay awake in my apartment, I heard it again, faint, but clear, 3 slow knocks on the ceiling above my bed. I didn't move. The house was hundreds of kilometers away, but the sound was the same. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. And in that silence, a child's voice, calm, almost relieved, whispered, "Thank you."